All right, John, we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Coach's Corner, and today we're going to be meeting with one of our partners and talking about virtual assistants and maximizing your bottom line. So, John Parks, we've had a relationship over the last couple of years. John, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's always good to see you.
Yes. Well, let's talk real quick about how we met. We met 2.5 years ago, I believe, maybe 2 years ago.
Couple years ago, yeah.
A couple years ago, you were looking at potentially being a franchise owner, and it actually was between this job. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming that it was between a place home franchise ownership, which is still on the table. We haven't stopped talking.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
And then Solvo as an account manager or sale or business developer, I believe. And we went the route with Solvo, and then you brought this great idea to us. And then we also, at the same time, we were talking to our franchise owner, Nalima, out in Schaumburg, Illinois, who brought this to us. And we said, let's look into this virtual assistant program that you have. And we've started using you guys, bringing on great people. I think I have 2 at the corporate office in Dulce and Facundo. And I think we have, 14 or 15 virtual assistants across our system right now.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. In various roles, whether schedulers, recruiters, administrative assistants, etc. So yeah, it's been good. And it was, a great opportunity when I began discussing the idea of franchise ownership with you all. One of the things that I was lacking at the time was time. Having a wife and a couple of teenage daughters, I thought, gosh, I don't know if I have the bandwidth right now to dive in franchise ownership, etc. But then just meeting with your team and Mitch and everybody, understanding the dynamics of what it takes to be an owner, led me right back to you guys after I started in my role. Because here at Solvo, we essentially can help people with their most precious resource, that's time. And I would say a close second to the most precious resource is the teams that they have around them. And just understanding how much the team members that we can provide can help an agency owner by taking stuff off of their plate. I went right back to Mitch. I said, hey, this is something that I think your agency owners might be interested in. And to this date, we have not only you guys as great partners, but I think we have around 160, 170 home care agencies leveraging our services. So it's been a great relationship, and I appreciate you all.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big promoter. When I go to conferences, I walk people over to the Solvo table. Well, let's talk. Let's start from Solvo. Where are you located? The history. What do you guys specialize in? Let's get that background here so everyone knows the background of the company, and then I'm going to dive into our questions.
Yeah, sounds good. So my role here at Solvo, as you said, I'm a business development rep and essentially advise clients from all over the U.S. on how to leverage remote staffing. And we have teams throughout 18 countries working on behalf of U.S. companies. We've placed over 35,000 people in roles. Over 600 different job descriptions, actually. So the real commonalities are just that, businesses are struggling to staff, and this is an area where they're able to get really highly qualified talent, and happens to be college educated, bilingual professionals working 100% dedicated to the companies that they serve for around 40, 45 hours a week. And it ends up being about 60% less than hiring their counterparts in the U.S. because of the economies at scale. In addition, it's an opportunity for us to do really good things on both sides of the equation too. Unemployment in a lot of these markets is around 20%, but they've got great infrastructure, really strong education systems. And so by putting this program in place, we're able to really support U.S. businesses with the main thing they're lacking. I'll just say one more little stat before we dive into the questions. The U.S. Chamber has a stat that says that even if every unemployed American took a job today, there would still be 4 million unfilled roles in the U.S. And the big driver of that drives my industry, but also drives your industry. It's because there's more people retiring every day than are coming into the job market. And so as businesses start to think about, okay, how can I manage through these challenging staffing times, through tight margins? What are some of the tools that I have access to? And Solvo is certainly one of those.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll add to it, this is my little plug for Solvo and why we decided as an organization to really start to partner with Solvo was for that very reason. I think it was right around COVID, right after COVID, our average rates were like 27, 28 bucks an hour, and now they're 35 an hour, today. Our average pay rate also was like 12, 13. And today I think I just saw 17 to 18 an hour. In addition to its admin staff, right? So when you look at a P&L in a home care agency, 50% gross margin. So you have your 35 minus your 1750 in payroll to your caregivers plus payroll taxes and whatnot. You only have 50% left. And as an organization, we want to be in between 15 to 20. So let's just use 20. That only gives us 30% for every other expense: insurance, rent, admin staff. And so where your second biggest expense comes to as an organization is your admin staff, your care coordinators, your care recruiters, your field supervisors, your office managers, your bookkeeping, what have you, right? Which is under office manager. And so when we started evaluating this, we said, hey, we can really cut that admin cost from 10 to 12% down to like 6 to 8. Now, some people watching this, they're critics of virtual assistants, right? May say, well, yeah, you're just paying people less overseas, and people look at the horror stories of the what do they call those? Chop shops? What do they call those? Sweatshops.
Sweatshops.
Yeah, sweatshops. Right. That's the image some people have. And that's not the case. I always say judge people by what a can of Coke costs in Colombia versus up here. Right. The cost of living down there is way less than the cost of living up here. So when you look at their pay versus our pay, comes out to maybe the same, if not maybe more. But what it also does for American companies like ours is that it gives us a pool of cash now that we've been able to save on our margin, and we give bonuses. I tell owners, like, give a $100 a month bonus to your solver, or give 200. I hope they're probably watching this and they probably have an owner. Maybe they didn't give them a bonus. Hope they are doing that. They should be. But we have like my Dulce and Facundo, who do our bookkeeping services, right? I've given Danny, their manager in our office, here's a pool, right? If they do something outstanding, throw some money at. And it goes directly to them, does it not? Right, John?
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for them, they're so appreciative, right? Like, they're so appreciative. And those today, and I'm not gonna bash the American worker here, but if I were to give $200 to a worker here, they'd probably take it, stare at you, and say thanks, and just walk away. These guys are actually like take the time and write like, hey, this is great, thank you so much, I could use this. You know what I mean? And as a business owner, you want to feel appreciated, that the things that you do for your employees like gets noticed. Maybe it's an ego thing to me, maybe, I don't know. But that's the one thing, is that they work very hard. They are involved, and there's ways to manage them. And I'll get into how at the end, when we go through these questions, on how you manage virtual assistants, how we do it and teach it. But the biggest thing is you don't treat them like a virtual assistant. You treat them like an actual employee. And I'll get into that later. Yeah. So that's why we got into it. I think we've had great luck with it. Just like any employee, I know we've let some go and rehired some, right? Some people, you can't just expect everyone to fit everything, but it has been a very, very big value add to our system. So, John, you ready to go into your questions?
Yeah. Yep. Ready to roll. Right. Thanks again.
We have 6 questions here today that we're going to dive into. And the first one is, can you explain what remote staffing entails and why it has become an essential strategy for businesses? And I kind of answered this one, in the home care industry. And then let's add on, how did Solvo come about targeting the home care industry?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'll start with how Solvo started to begin with.
Sure.
Because I think that's an interesting story, and it really resonates because it was started by a business owner that had a location here in the U.S. as well as down in Colombia in the steel industry. And just like most everybody nowadays, they were struggling to staff key roles in their back office. And he thought, well, what if I try to leverage our Colombian office and have people start to fill these roles down there? And then it ended up being a couple of people in dispatch. And then it added to that. And then it was 4 people. And then it was a couple hundred people supporting that business additionally from the Colombia office. And it just became what started with the challenge of filling positions with highly qualified people. And it just blossomed. And then our vendors and customers started saying, hey, can you tell us about what you've got going on there with that dynamic? And then our business really developed from there to the point that, as I mentioned, we've filled over 600 different job descriptions and, have over 35,000 people working on behalf of U.S. companies now. And then in the home care industry, we've been working within this industry for around 4 years. Started with some key interest of owners from other franchises, recognizing that, hey, we have to start to think differently about how we are programming our business. Being on the hiring hamster wheel is like beating your head against the wall for a lot of people. And it really detracts from working on your business because you're stuck working in your business and not being able to move forward. And so for a lot of people, that was kind of the key factor. Like, hey, let's look at what if we had a recruiter? That's a position that takes up a lot of our time that we could effectively train somebody to do. And that's how we got involved in the industry. And then it evolved to where they started asking, hey, could we add a scheduler into this mix, et cetera. And for the last 2.5, 3 years, we've had scheduler academies and recruiter academies where they're about a 2-week. We find people that have aptitude and some background in the either recruiting or scheduling industry, and then walk them through a boot camp. Basically, it's a really robust program where they learn more about what it means to be a recruiter in home care or to be a scheduler in home care. And I think in both instances, they're pretty different than recruiting in other industries, or especially from scheduling in other industries, because it is so often kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Like, we got to react to these and resolve problems that are coming up quickly, but also try to think proactively about what's happening next week. So those programs run by Anderson have been extremely helpful for our clients, and putting these people in these roles and giving them basically a leg up when they first start in their roles, so they have some background and experience. But I'll say this, ultimately, like any employee that your franchisees hire or you hire corporate, the success is truly up to you. They're working at your discretion, and they're, your onboarding and training is going to be extremely crucial. And I would say the only misses where we've had on the scheduling side is if somebody, not necessarily within your agency, but if somebody says, hey, here's the job, go at it, and then set it and forget it. Just like you said earlier, you really have to treat them like a normal member of your team and, their family, but also just as if you would hire somebody in your own office, you would want to train them properly, onboard them properly, and give them the skills. And so I'll talk a little bit more about some of the best practices that we've put in place, not only for the recruiting role, but the scheduling role and other ways that our team is supporting the agencies.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Let's talk about the partnership impact. I kind of talked about us. Let's talk about Solvo here. Over the past year, how has the partnership between us and you guys evolved in your eyes? And what specific outcomes have you seen for franchise owners that you've spoken to, and I can speak to it as well, leveraging remote staffing solutions?
Yeah. So for myself, as you mentioned, Nalima did have some conversations with a colleague of mine earlier on, but one of my first clients was Jerome. And he was talking about having some challenges, and his challenges were unique in that he was turning a lot of business away. And that's a great fortune to have, what a blessing. But at the same time, it's a painful blessing to not be able to capitalize on that. And so he brought on a recruiter with us, Juan Jonathan, and right out of the gate, Juan Jonathan was really helping him to recruit a lot of solid caregivers, get them through onboarding, and then really change the dynamic for him where he could turn away less business. He opened up a second location and was able to, I think even just this month, I've looked at some of Juan Jonathan's KPIs, and I think the expectations that he's onboarding about 4 caregivers a week. And I know just a couple of weeks ago, he onboarded 8 of them. And so there's been a lot of success with that, but just that attention to somebody updating the job posts, posting the job offerings, reaching out to caregivers. This is really crucial. This is a big part of the success with a recruiter, reaching out to caregivers when they inquire, as opposed to when you can get around to it, because they have other opportunities, and so they can slip through the back door. So by being able to have somebody dedicated to seeing them right away, that's extremely important. But then they're able to help them with their background checks, getting all their pre-screening paperwork in, and essentially doing the initial interviews to make sure that this person's going to be a fit for the agency profile. And then in most cases, they are introducing them on for their final interview. Agency owner can make the offer, and then they step back in with the onboarding. But I know with Juan Jonathan, within about a month, he was he just knew the profile of the caregiver so well that he was able to do the final interview, make the offer. And I know he's even involved in recruiting local in-office staff now as well.
Awesome. So yeah, recruiting is one. I would say that recruiting for us is probably the biggest position that is utilized for Solvo. I know that some of our owners use them for bookkeeping. So that's another area that I've seen owner like Natalie, I believe in Little Rock, has someone who manages her QuickBooks, who then works with us and has, if they have questions, they reach out to us and we kind of give them training on it. For her end of year bookkeeping to give to her accountant, and then her accountant will question the bookkeeping done and reconcile everything. And then Natalie's books are being managed, and I think they do billing and payroll for her as well. She's a very large agency. She's doing probably about $3.5 to $4 million of business, and this person's doing their billing, their payroll, I believe, and all bookkeeping services. Or if anything, honestly, I think that their manager of their location is finalizing those bills and payroll, and then they're doing the exportation and processing of that. Another one that I use down in Jacksonville, we have Natalia, who does social media posts. She does recruiting as well, but she does social media posts for us, and she sends them to the marketing department for approval. And I know some owners use them for that. Care coordinators, the schedulers. We've used them for that as well. It's a little tricky on that one. You got to be really good about training people on that, because that takes extreme amount of communication. And the big issue people run into with virtual assistants and being care coordinators, the only lack that may happen is the culture, right? Because they're always talking to them, and you want caregivers to be able to come to the office and meet the team. Well, the biggest relationship between the agency and your caregivers stems to that care coordinator. It can be done, but again, it's one of those practices that you have as an owner, and we'll talk about how to maybe build the relationship between a virtual care coordinator and staff towards the end here if we have time. But those are the main positions that I've seen. I've seen in digital marketing, data entry. I've used them for that. Do a lot with portals where we buy leads, our website leads, and they take that information, they plug it in. We have owners who go out and meet 10 to 20 people a week getting business cards, and they don't want to go back into WellSky and type all that in. They take those cards, they send those cards over, or pictures of cards over to the virtual assistant. They enter them in. They ask what's the follow-up, and then they schedule the follow-up stuff for them as well. So there's all types of stuff that's actually a true virtual. That's an assistant right there. So
a couple of things on the scheduling side. I totally agree with you. It is a more subtle and nuanced role, and it is important for an agency to have a couple of things happen. Number one, I would say the onboarding time is by design longer, giving your scheduler time to reach out to the caregivers and meet all of them, reach out to all the clients and meet all of them. So there's a relationship evolving there, giving them time to work the phones and understand the cadence of the agency and some of the challenges that happen within the agency. But also, it truly is a function of garbage in, garbage out. And part of their onboarding should be making sure that they're gathering all that institutional knowledge from the various people within the office and saying, okay, talk to me about the dynamics between this caregiver and this client. What are some of the things I need to know? And by capturing all that and having it in the system, it makes it easier for them to do the scheduling when they are ready for it. I would say they typically start out more as junior schedulers, as opposed to the care coordinator on the team, et cetera, and support other people within the office. But it's still absolutely taking a big burden off of the team's plates in terms of helping when there are call outs and knowing how to prioritize. If there's a couple of different call outs happening at one time, which one do I really need to fill more urgently? But helping with missed clock-ins and a lot of those types of things. But and they can also be on both sides, on the recruiting side and the scheduler side, a big part of caregiver retention and how they manage those relationships.
Quick question for you. How you started a new on-call service. I know we were talking about us, but how's that going on a national scale?
Very well. Yeah. And I should say this. So the academies that we have 2 locations now where we're doing that because of the growth that we are having. We have our locations in Columbia still, where your team has come and visited, and we're going to have another group coming next February, but also in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya, we have established another school, and that's been great. Extremely strong recruiting source, really, really strong talent pool, speaking primarily kind of a more native English. It's a little bit more of a British accent, I would say. So you're missing out on the bilingual aspect, but for a lot of agencies, that's not a major issue. But it's really given us another strong talent pool to draw from. So yeah, to your question about the on-call scheduling programs, we have both dedicated and shared resources, like within the agencies where we're able to, or within the franchise groups where we're able to have 3 or 4 different agencies work together to make sure that they have their hours covered 24/7. But we're also doing that for some larger agencies, just fully dedicated out of that Kenya office because of the cost and affordability. So it's been good. And the other thing that I would say with that is, as we talk about the benefits of remote staffing for an agency owner, it really does help with retention. I know we'll get to that point, but that on-call program is a great piece of retention for keeping their own local teams, again, a most cherished resource, from burning out and giving them some of their lives back and really helping to manage through all those challenges that come up on the evenings and overnights.
Yeah.
And weekends. Yep.
It's interesting. Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of home care owners out there would really appreciate some weekends back.
Yeah.
I remember my times running an agency. I hated the weekends.
Yeah. Actually, just reading a book right now. It is called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And it's truly just about business owners trying to figure out how to clone themselves, get some of their really, really valuable time back so they can work on the higher functions of their business and have some of their own life back. But yeah, it's really just about, and the subtitle is like, get unstuck, reclaim your freedom, and build your empire. So I know those are all the things that your home care owners are trying to do. And
yeah,
you have to be well-rounded. You can't just be only about your business or you'll burn out. And so
that's where most people stall. Right. I'll tell you right now, like between $750,000 to $1.2 million home care agencies are going to stall if they don't have the team and the systems in place and the workflow charts. Right.
Yeah.
Like, you got it. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's easier to be a business, a home care owner like myself, to maybe have one scheduler and do everything up to about $500,000 to $600,000. But where most owners falter is they want to save money. They're like, they want to do part-time. I want to do a part-time person here because of the costs, right? But those are investments into your growth. And so that's, again, Solvo gives you that full-time employee for that part-time price, I would say.
Yep.
That can start. Now you can't build, and this is no knock on virtual assistants. You can't build an entire team of virtual assistants. That would be very difficult.
I wouldn't want that either. Yeah.
But you gotta intertwine them.
Yep.
Right. All right. Let's talk. Well, you just talked about delegation. So what a perfect segue into question number 3. How can business owners effectively delegate tasks to remote staff to free up their time and focus on strategic growth? Can you share examples from our partnership or any other home care partnership for that matter, where this has been particularly impactful?
Yeah. So one of the phrases I tripped over a half a year ago, I think, is delegate and elevate. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not able to figure out how to get some of the things off of your plate, you just get bogged down in the daily grind. And that's not a leadership role to take on. And so I advise my clients on a couple of things. Number one, if you're struggling to think of how can I leverage this person for 40 to 45 hours a week, happy to spend time with you. We can storyboard it and get it all mapped out. But ultimately, it's about keeping a notebook by your computer, jotting down the things that you don't have time for. Where are your bottlenecks? What are the things that you really should be doing but don't really like to do? What are things that you don't have an aptitude in that maybe somebody else can step in and support you in that regard? And it's pretty easy to cobble together a pretty strong list of things. I know Emmanuel, one of the solvers working on behalf of one of your agencies, has like 39 different tasks that he's supporting the team with. Some of it is in HR, some of it is in scheduling, some of it is in recruiting, some of it is just straight up virtual assistant, some of it is in payroll and bookkeeping and those types of roles. So we oftentimes will have people working in hybrid roles, right, where they have their main competency, but then these jobs are really meaningful to our solvers, right? And so I hear this over and over again that I love working with Solvo, and I really appreciate how willing the solvers are to take on additional tasks as we assign them. We don't get that from our US-based employees as much. And these jobs are meaningful. And so having additional tasks built into the job description or baked into the job duties is really part of the normal process for us. And it works differently from what I hear from staffing in the US. And I actually was at a conference with another franchise group, and there honestly were I think they have about 80 people working with us. Literally 50 times people came up to the booth and said, "Oh my gosh, I love working with so-and-so, but I really love how willing they are to take on additional tasks." And so for me, that was a real eye-opener to another aspect, another nice benefit of having a solver on your team, because I do think it kind of causes all tides to rise with their work ethic.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I know here it elevated our corporate headquarters with those bookkeeping services. I mean, we have owners. I think we have 15 to 20 owners utilizing Dulce and Facundo right now for bookkeeping services, and Danny oversees it. So it's been a huge help for that. And it's an area of growth for business too, right? I mean, we charge for that, right? So you can even use virtual assistants for areas of opportunity. Think if you use them as, I don't know, care coordinators, right? If you could teach them how to manage certain situations. Now, a lot of people on care coordination, you want social work background and everything like that. Do you guys have people with a background in social work, discharge planning down there?
So we literally have hundreds of millions of people in our talent pool, right? And so we're able to find kind of any background. It's just a matter of bringing them into the role and sourcing them properly. That's part of the beautiful things that I really didn't talk about our process is that, say the agency owner says, I want to recruit a recruiter for my team or a scheduler for my team. We get together and talk about the job description with our onboarding team, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, the personality traits, the things that will make them a really strong fit for your team. And then we turn that over to our team of recruiters, 200 recruiters. And then typically within about a week to 10 days, we're sending back profiles with videos so you can see their accent and their fluency, their comfortability talking the language, their personality, most importantly. But you also get a resume so you can see all the various things in their background. So we really have, we've sourced from everything from a CFO to data entry and everything in between. So
what about virtual nurses?
Well, if it's a licensed role, a role that would need to be licensed in the US, we're typically not filling that kind of a role. But oftentimes we do find people that have nursing background in their home country and then are applying it in various ways, non-licensed in the US. Likewise, we're placing attorneys in paralegal roles, and they're getting paid better, have a better opportunity for themselves than doing their traditional role in their home country.
Yeah. Well, not to like brainstorm right here live, but if you had RNs, home care, some states require RN oversight, most don't. But it would be nice to maybe have an RN that is virtual to be able to triage certain things. Like, hey, so-and-so's and there's wound care. Now we don't perform wound care on most times on the home health, on the home care side. Home health does that.
Yeah.
That could be a good addition to market. Right. You can go out to your marketing and say, hey, we have a nurse on staff. They are a nurse, right? And you're not violating anything because your agency doesn't require a licensed nurse most times. Some do, some don't. But anyways.
So to that end, we actually do, because, we are owned by the second or third largest professional employment organization in the country. We have a lot of great partners that support us in a variety of ways, but we actually do have an Ask a Nurse program that is staffed by US-based nurses. So we should talk further about that, but it'd be more on the home health side, or having more nursing support for home care, where you can triage up phone calls to actually nurses working in their role. So always have room for ideas. I like it.
There you go. Well, with technology coming and AI and all these different programs coming up, if you had somebody who can monitor all that consistently and have a nursing background, might be an added value. All right, but I'm not going to give my secrets away, John, here to all these other home care agencies. But let's see. Next question. You ready? Retention. Retention's a big thing. Inter-office retention's huge. Everyone focuses on caregiver retention, so much so that sometimes the office staff retention falls to the wayside. office staff retention is equally important. Like, it is one of the biggest stallers of growth if you cannot stabilize your office staff. So like for us, I had Danny and Aubrey. I had my two staples, Danny and I. Aubrey, Danny's still with me. Aubrey went on to be a content writer, and she still works with us on certain projects. But I couldn't have done it without those two, for sure, right? And those agencies that are constantly turning over care coordinators, recruiters, office managers, always, and they don't have that staple person, it can be very hard to grow because you're always retraining somebody, right? So retention is a key challenge. How can remote staffing solutions help businesses retain both their office staff teams and caregivers?
So a couple things. Again, these positions that we are filling, we're filling them for about 60% less than their counterpart in the US, right? And so for me, I'm interested in helping companies grow. I'm interested in helping companies when they have attrition and they're struggling to find people for that role. I don't want to have the conversation about, hey, who could we get rid of because we have this? That's not what I want. I don't think that's healthy. I think we have enough opportunity in just going about business the right way with growth and helping to solve for attrition. Because we're saving money on the remote staffing side, we're able to allow companies to invest more in benefits for their local support team, invest more in their pay, and win more of those battles because oftentimes they're losing them to competitors who are paying a little bit more or maybe have more robust benefits. And so if you can save over here and leverage it to support your local team, that's a win. Secondly, we talked about this a little bit before, but a good way to chase off some really talented employees is by giving them more and more duties and not changing their wages. And there's actually a term you maybe have heard of, quiet quitting, right? Where people feel like they are in the driver's seat and they can just kind of perform their role in a half-baked way. And that's called quiet quitting. But also companies and owners are oftentimes guilty of quiet hiring, where they don't replace somebody that's been lost to attrition, but they take all those duties and assign it to somebody else on the team. And so by leveraging, it's part of the deal. But if you can avoid it by leveraging these extremely talented individuals to fill these roles on behalf of your team and support them, we're there to support and help take some of the pressure off. And so people don't have to wear so many hats and won't get burnt out. I think those key things are really important for retention. But then also just the attention by having somebody in that dedicated recruiter role that can spend time on the caregiver side, doing caregiver retention functions, recognition, just calling and touching base, saying, how are things going? What can I support you with? And establishing relationships a little bit more because they have time to take a breath and do those kind of things. That can really help on the caregiver retention side as well. And as I mentioned, we do have some of our recruiters supporting the agencies with helping to hire internal roles as well. It's not just about caregiver recruitment, but also helping to hire for those internal roles as well.
Yeah, and that's one big key that I think you hit on is the fine details, right? When you're a care coordinator, you know what I used to do? Just take a step back here. As an agency owner, I would send out I've shared this story a couple times over the last year, is I would send out random acts of kindness, right? I'd send a text message to caregivers. When I had a team, I would send out text messages to all my caregivers just saying, hey, I hope you have a great day. And here's how I judged how our retention was, all right? If they respond to me and they say, I'm great, thanks for asking, I'm pretty comfortable. If they respond to me, hey, I'm great, what do you want? That means that all they see us as is when we reach out to them is asking them to do things, go to shifts, last minute things, right?
Yeah.
And so having that solver work on retention, sending out those little random acts of kindness, like, hey, we hope you have a great day. Let us know if you need anything, and build that relationship. And that solver just works on the caregiver relationship. Hey, how's things going? Right. To an extent, right? We're not going to be their therapist.
Right.
It can happen in home care. But all those little random things can really increase your retention, and it alleviates the time spent by your office staff, right? Your care coordinator can be your care coordinator. Care coordinator doesn't have to focus on like, okay, I have to be, I mean, they naturally do, right? They
Yep.
naturally build relationships with people and start forming a bond with these caregivers. But to ask them on top of their job of managing call outs and scheduling in advance, and you're, a lot of clients, a lot of billable hours to manage, to ask them on top of that to say, hey, make sure you're sending text messages out, happy birthdays, high fives, kudos, all that kind of stuff, to do that too. It's a real tough ask.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So,
And it's amazing how a little bit of that proactive recognition and just relationship building helps, but also it's otherwise you're spending time rehiring or to fill the roles, etc. And that's more painful and challenging and time consuming and a negative to the agency overall. So it's time well spent for sure.
exactly. All right. Next question here. Best practices for integration. This is what I was talking about earlier. For home care businesses just starting to use remote staffing, what are some best practices to ensure seamless integration into their operation? How does Solvo support that process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm glad you bring it up because it is an important function of success with any virtual staffing that you're going to do. At Solvo, so like I mentioned, we've placed around 35,000 people in roles. Most of the companies that we work with have never staffed like this before, right? And so it's a challenge for them. And so throughout our nesting period, we are helping them to just get comfortable with the idea of how to do this well. But also, oftentimes, the employees, the solvers, have never had this type of employment relationship either. So we have a supervisor assigned to every account to help establish standard operating procedures and KPIs and manage to those things, productivity, et cetera, on behalf of the agencies. And so there's an extra layer of protection in there and just productivity that we add in with the experienced supervisors. The best thing I can tell you, as I kind of mentioned before, is treat them as part of your team as you normally would. If you have a morning huddle, make sure that they're incorporated. If you have an end-of-day report out, make sure that they're incorporated. Give them a speaking part in your weekly meetings and letting them know that the piece of the puzzle that they're doing is valuable to the team and be there as a resource when they have questions. Again, the times where we've not had success, for the most part, it's been when people are just, hey, oh, you have this title, you should be able to do this role. Talk to you at the end of the week, right? That's not a recipe for success. In addition to that, I think, I had the opportunity to work with some people from our home care side of the business on operations, as well as with Aubrey and also Natalie, and built some standard best practices for onboarding a scheduler, for example, to try to anticipate some of the things that could go wrong and how do we work around that and what are some of the practices that we should build in. So I share that with agencies as they're coming on board as well. But some of it is just common logic, but some of it is just steps to take. And the real key there in making that a successful relationship is it's a very nuanced relationship between the caregiver and the client. And again, making sure that the scheduler has every opportunity to learn about those dynamics and then support in a kind of a junior fashion and evolve in their role moving forward, I think is a real key there. But so those are some of the things that we do to help folks that are not necessarily used to having virtual assistants get into their role. I also mentioned, kind of the steps that you can take of how do I delegate more and understand the importance of delegating and getting comfortable with it. That's kind of an uncomfortable thing of giving up something, right? You feel like you're giving up control when you delegate, but truly it does free you to get to that next level. Mm-hmm. And in that book I mentioned earlier, he talks about if you don't have a virtual assistant, you still do. You just happen to be your virtual, you happen to be your assistant. And for the agency owners and other key personnel within the office, they have things that they should be doing at a higher function. And so anything that they can pass off, they're moving the agency ahead.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I'll piggyback it too, is that, let's see, I'll use Natalie down in Little Rock again. I know she has 2 solvers. The culture that she's created down there, and a lot of our owners do this. I just use Natalie because I saw a fresh post and I know how she is with them. Like, they had a Christmas party and they had their 2, I can't remember their names, but she had the 2 virtual assistants, the 2 solvers on computer laptops.
Yeah.
And then they would put them by the front door so that when caregivers would walk in to get their little Christmas gifts and their goodies, they're walking right by the solvers, and the solvers are sitting there waving at them and having a conversation and engaging with the caregivers as well. So the caregivers actually know and put a picture to the face with who these people are, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
so that's the culture you got to do. Like you said, you got to involve them in the meetings. You got to give them goals, let them shoot for goals, and then put a metric. That's a great thing to say. Hey, you hit your goals this month, you get $100, and they'll work for it. And that's what you do. And then you can build a team. And then like in Jacksonville, I know Ro and Natalia work very well together, right? They're always communicating. So
yeah,
you gotta build that culture of communication between them. You can't just forget about them. Like, our organization, we use GChat. GChat's huge for us to chat between each other. We give them a phone number for most of them have a phone number, a dedicated line. So if a caregiver calls, they can answer and talk to them. Don't hide them, right? Let them be part of your team.
Yeah. And I'll say this, for most of the markets, like I talked about, unemployment's pretty high, and they really cherish these opportunities to work for especially small and medium-sized U.S. businesses. Outside of like our type of a solution, there are other opportunities. So they typically are, if you're under 35, you're learning English at a very young age. It's an important part of an opportunity for them. It's a way up and a way out, right? And either they are working for a major contact center where they're one of thousands working for a major cellular company, or they have opportunities like this where they can be a part of the family and part of the goals and growth and have a career path within a small agency. And those things, like, they really, really cherish that. And they're I love seeing notes when my agency owners are talking about their solvers as family. That is amazing to me. And that's exactly the recipe for success.
100%. All right. So last question, we have the future. And I kind of talked about technology earlier. As technology continues to evolve, where do you see the future of remote staffing heading? And how does Solvo Global, also AI, I'd be interested to see your guys' point on AI. And how does Solvo Global plan to stay at the forefront of these innovations for a place at home and other partners?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'll say as Solvo overall, we have a team of over 100 people on our IT and cybersecurity and tech teams. And they're always looking for opportunities for us to be at the forefront. And I know internally, not necessarily within home care, but we have solutions that offer like customer service where it starts out as a chat-based solution. And then it levels up to a virtual voice assistant. And then through this algorithm learning, it's helping that to be more intelligent in its responses. But at the time that somebody needs to level up and talk to a human, they'll reach out to a solver that we can have working in customer service. But the numbers of calls that are getting to a solver are much more limited. And so it's a more cost-effective solution overall, because you can build a team in a more cost-effective way with that technology that we're leveraging. And it's great. A lot of industries are using that. I'll say this. So what we've done really well on the Solvo side for home care and other industries is they're working within the systems that the owners have in place. Like, as you mentioned, they're getting their dedicated phone line, their the equipment and all the stuff that they need to work on behalf of the agency, the email. So it looks like they're just a part of your team and not necessarily from afar. And if agency owners want them working in, like I was mentioning, like the 39 different tasks that Emmanuel was working on, working within WellSky, working within Viventium, other hiring platforms that all are part of the solution. And technology is going to become more a part of the solution and helping to make things more efficient. But I don't think in most cases technology is going to take over the entire role. Just as you mentioned, virtual assistants should not take over a whole office, right? There's going to need to be that human element. And so I think the agencies of the future will have a combination of the boots on the ground, as well as the virtual assistants of various roles, recruiter, schedulers, whatever they might be, lead gen, et cetera. But also incorporating some of the platforms in a cost-effective way to help with that efficiency. And then the solvers can be using those platforms, right? I think the new platforms can get you part of the way there, but by having the solver in that role, or at least managing part of their role to make sure that human element is still involved, is going to be important. We do have a couple of agencies, I don't think within a place at home, that are leveraging AI with their solvers. And it's a couple of extra special permissions that we would need to get that allowed on their computers to make sure that connection is good. But yeah, some of the agencies are using that for correspondence and for helping with calendar management and scheduling, et cetera. And so, you know, our supervisors learn more and more about that all the time. And together they're, you know, aware of some more of the new cutting edge best practices that we can leverage and advise our clients on.
Awesome. No, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, AI is obviously growing. You know, one of our biggest directions right now is our hospitalization tracking and our impacts that we're doing. I think that's a good opportunity for you guys as well to understand the impact part of things. But I think that you guys are on the right track.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One of the things that I just learned about recently too is one of our solvers is helping to create dashboards for the agency owner that are actually helping them to kind of anticipate the number of hours that they'll have in the coming weeks and get a feel for, based on previous experience, how many no-shows there are going to be, et cetera, and try to figure out staffing around that. So there's a lot of intelligence out there that helps to kind of do some predictive analytics, and just to know that one of our solvers is involved in that Power BI and putting those dashboards together is pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, I had Facuna do our entire budget. Well, yeah, we performed. We gave him the numbers, obviously, but he put the budget together for next year and forecasted for 2025. So, I mean, definitely have the skill set to do it. And John, any last comments here?
You know, there is. I definitely want to talk about the human aspect of this, and I really appreciate your team coming down to Columbia and meeting their solvers and seeing our operations. And I think that's one of the things. I've been down. I've been fortunate. I've been to Columbia 4 times now, Guatemala, Honduras, and when I go to our offices, I'm extremely humbled. Number one, I'm the only one that's not bilingual, so they're all really gracious with me. But just surrounded by so many extremely capable people that are in these roles. And you know, I'm from South Dakota here. I traveled to Mexico, maybe Dominican Republic, but I didn't really see much of the world before this role. And sure. I love the fact that the world is so much smaller than it used to be. It's easy to work together. Infrastructure is so much better than I ever would have expected, but the people that I get to work with are extremely amazing. And so by having some of your team down there to become huge advocates for us, meeting their solvers and deepening the bonds between them is really nice. But also for them to get a chance to see our operations, know that we're doing, you know, safe and secure work, number one, but also doing good things on that side of the equation where the solvers are doing well enough in their roles where they're able to go out and do good things in their own communities. Right. And that, like you mentioned at the very outset, this is not a sweatshop. This is something where we're providing great opportunities and that are extremely mutually beneficial for both the American-based business and our solvers down in our various markets. But we're excited to have some more of your team down there in February. But what a great chance to, again, just deepen those relationships and actually influence the programs as well by having conversations with Anderson and the academies and Laura, who oversees our home care programs, et cetera. We take the feedback and we do, make adjustments and try to move the needle forward for everybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, to even go on that, I mean, I'm bringing up Facundo got his visa the other day. Did you know that?
I knew he was working on it. I'm glad he got it.
He got it, I think, last week. Or, well, it had to have been last week because today's Monday. So, yeah, it was last week he got it. And then Dulce already had her. So, as a follow-up item to this webinar, make sure we get with Danny so we can get that travel taken care of. So,
get them to your conference, right? To meet
warm them up there, have a nice little table, meet the owners that they're working with, and meet the team. So, we're looking forward to that. So in closing for myself, you know, it's been a great partnership with Solvo since we started. It's proven to be a good area of opportunity for us to expand upon. Owners are building strong teams out there with solvers. We've learned over the last year how to integrate them into the team. And I think you hit the nail on the head with everything we talked about today. So I want to thank you for coming on here, sharing the Solvo story and our partnership and how to successfully improve bottom line with virtual assistants, because I know it's true. So, John, thanks so much, and we'll call it a day.
Yep, very good. Thank you, everybody from the Place at Home team. Appreciate working with all of you, and thanks again for the time. Good to see you again.
All right. Thanks, John.
Bye now.